Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. I am here to do kind of a recommendations video for the Spoonie Readathon. The Spoonie Readathon is being hosted by Emily at Novels and Kat at Brews and Reviews. And this is basically just a readathon focusing on disability, and that's pretty much, I am a person with a disability and I work in a field that serves people with disabilities. So, yep, right up my alley. I actually had to stop myself from collecting books off my bookshelf for recommendations because that would make this video very long, and we don't have time for that. So I'm going to go through the prompts and just kind of give my recommendations. I'll list the prompts below and link to Emily and Kat's channels. I think there's going to be a few readathon, reading sprints maybe as well. So the first prompt is read a book written by an author with a disability. So most of the books that I'm going to recommend are written by authors with a disability. To me, that's the best type of work to read, is from an own voices perspective. So I will let you know if I'm not sure if the person has a disability, but most of them are. Number 2, read a book with a character who has an invisible disability. So I have a couple of recommendations. Also, some of the ones that I have for other categories would also fit this prompt, and I'll let you know when we get to those. But a few that I don't have copies of that I've read. One is a middle grade, and it's called A Summer of June, and it's by Jamie Sumner. This is a look at a young girl with anxiety, and I think I've mentioned here before, I work in psychology. I'm a little hesitant at times about how psychology is depicted, especially if it's written from someone who doesn't experience it. You tend to get a lot of stereotypes within that writing. So own voices is ideal. I don't know if Jamie Sumner has a disability herself, but this book, A Summer of June, was a great representation of anxiety, especially in a younger person, and kind of the reactions of those around her. And yeah, I think it's a great read. I read it a couple years ago, and I highly recommend it. Another one that I read earlier this year is All the Little Bird Hearts by Victoria Lloyd Barlow. This one has been talked about a little bit, and it's about a mom who, it's not really said specifically, but she kind of has tendencies that make you think she may be neurodivergent, and it's about her interaction with new neighbors and how she parents her teenage daughter and kind of those interactions. And I think it's a really good book. It's got some gut punches, several of the chapters, just the intensity of what Sunday the mother experienced. So again, highly recommend that one. And then there's, like I said, there's, I'll mention when I pull out books, because I've got stacks, which ones have invisible disabilities. Okay, read a nonfiction book about disabilities. This is where we're going to get into the stacks, because I read a lot of nonfiction featuring disability rep or disability history, memoirs about people with disabilities. That's kind of a go-to for me, mainly because I am a person living with multiple disabilities, and so I want to hear from others who have experienced similar situations, how they deal with the day-to-day, how they deal with work, how they deal with relationships. And so the first nonfiction I want to talk about is The Invisible Kingdom by Megan O'Rourke, Reimagining Chronic Illness. This is, as you can see from all the tabs, I think this is a great book. It looks at this kind of emerging, I don't know if it's emerging, it's been around for a while, but starting to talk more about chronic illness and how prevalent it is. I think a lot of that has also, the awareness has raised post-COVID because of people living with long COVID. And Megan herself deals with several chronic illnesses, and a lot of times when you start experiencing symptoms of like a long COVID or fibromyalgia or an autoimmune disorder that might not show up on blood work or any other acceptable diagnostic test, you kind of go through years of trying to find a diagnosis and a doctor that will believe you. That's more typical with women. Men do experience it, but it's definitely more typical for women. And Megan kind of looks into all of that. She looks into the history. She looks into the history of women, and, you know, hysteria used to be a diagnosis. Yeah, it's a great book. I would say it leans a little bit more towards an academic read, but easier. It's not hard to read at all. It just might take you a little bit of time. I don't remember how long it took me, but I definitely read chapters and then put it down, and I watched interviews with Megan. She did a number of virtual like book clubs and talks and things for her book. And let's see, because I think this came out in 2022, so she was writing it experiencing the pandemic as well. So great book. Let's see, we were talking about nonfiction. What are we talking about? Okay, you can go there. The next one I want to talk about is a memoir, Still Life by Josie George. This would also count for the invisible disability prompt. Josie George went through many years of being unwell and not getting an answer. Her symptoms caused her to not be able to go out a lot, having to stay in her house, and just not having energy to, you know, go and do the things that she wanted to do. It really, I didn't have tabs when I was reading this, and you can tell I dog-eared all the pages. For me, this was a very moving book because it is something that I've dealt with myself. So I think this is a great read for anyone, and also especially for people who have loved ones that are dealing with illnesses where they don't have the energy, or pain is too much to do a lot of stuff. Yeah, which is kind of a huge part of being a spoonie, is you don't have, the spoons represent energy, and you don't have enough spoons to get through the day, or it takes up so many spoons which is allotments of energy to be able to take a shower or just fix a meal, or in this case, Josie has a child, and being able to parent. I think that is, part of just the hard part of having a chronic illness that impacts you in that way. And Josie is very honest, and this is raw. It also talks about her finding love as well. So beautiful memoir, highly recommend. The next one that I want to talk about is a book of essays. This is Pain Woman Takes Your Keys and Other Essays from a Nervous System by Sonia Huber. This is about Sonia's experience with a chronic illness and an invisible disability. Would definitely be a Spoonie. It is just basically, like, my review of this when I read it was, I feel seen. Similar experiences. Sonia talks about trying to navigate work when your body can't do, as our society expects us to. Again, parenting in this is a big part of it, and it's got a little bit of humor in there too, which definitely appreciate. If you deal with a chronic illness, you may have said at times that if I don't laugh, I'm going to cry, and that's kind of, you definitely get some of that from this book as well. A book that I recommend all the time is Disability Visibility, First-Person Stories from the 21st Century, edited by Alice Wong. This book is a number of essays by different people with disabilities, and so there will be invisible and visible disabilities in the book. And it's just to me, it's a great primer for anyone who wants to know more about disability and be an ally and an advocate if you are a person without a disability. This would be a great place for you to start if you want to know more. And Alice Wong is a great person to follow on social media as well. She brings to mind for me, even though I live it and work in the field, there are times when I don't realize how a social issue or a social experience that's going on in the world impacts people with disabilities. And she's really knowledgeable about that, and shares information on her social media a lot as well. And she has a new book that just came out this month, maybe? Was it April? Or it's coming out. And I'll put a picture of it here. I think it's called Disability and Intimacy. I'll put it here. Another great nonfiction book is Disfigured, On Fairy Tales, Disability, and Making Space by Amanda LeDuc. I just finished this. This is a book that it took me a little while to get through, just mainly because it's essays, and I tend to kind of dip in and out of essay collections. But Amanda talks about her own experience with disability and also looking at it through the lens of the fairy tales that we know and have been told our whole lives. And typically, fairy tales, the villain is a person with a disability, whether it be a disfigurement, whether it be some kind of psychological disorder. There's just different ways that authors have villainized disability, and Amanda takes a deep dive into that. Some of the ones that we know well. Demystifying Disability, What to Know, What to Say, and How to Be an Ally by Emily Ladau. This is also a great book for people that want to know more about disability. Emily has a disability herself, and she is an advocate, disability rights advocate. She's also a great one to follow on social media. And I like this because it definitely breaks down the different models of disability. There's medical model, there's social justice, and this looks at it from a lens of all disabilities. And yeah, this is another great place to start. Let's see, am I still going on nonfiction? I am. See, and I didn't even grab them all either. This is another essay collection that I've read, but I don't own a copy, so I grabbed it out of the library. This is About Us, essays from the Disability series of the New York Times. This is edited by Peter Catapano and Rosemary Garland Thompson, and the foreword is by Andrew Solomon. This is essays, again, similar to Disability Visibility, has essays from people who have lived with disability and certain aspects of the world, that how it impacts them. There is, I can't remember if it's in this one or Disability Visibility. There's a essay about issues with transportation. And I apologize, I can't remember which one. So you need to read both, right? I can't remember which one it's in. But just the experience of depending on others for transportation to your job. And most of these have been written prior to the pandemic, and we've definitely had more opening up of remote work. It's great options for people with disabilities. Prior to the pandemic, a lot of people with disabilities that had transportation issues were not given opportunities to work because, employers would say that remote work wasn't possible. So I could get off on a tangent. That's one of my hot button topics. But these are both great essay collections for you to read. Okay, read a book featuring disability that isn't from the contemporary genre. So I struggled with this one because I wasn't really sure what would be included in the contemporary genre. So where are the books that I pulled out for this one? Here's. So I just pulled out some books by authors that are reported to have disabilities and talked about it a little themselves that are no longer with us. I don't know if would their work be considered contemporary? I'm not sure, but I'm gonna go with these. So Agatha Christie, there are some suggestions that she had a learning disability. There's also suggestions that she may have dealt with depression and anxiety, which I think from what I've read, there's probably a stronger suggestion of that based on her journals and letters and things. But so reading any Agatha Christie would count for that. I'm going to try and do the Murder in the Links. I think this is the next Hercule Poirot mystery that I need to read. So that's that one. And then one author that we recently lost was Hilary Mantel. Hilary Mantel wrote a book, and I should have grabbed it. It's upstairs. I will put a picture here. It's Giving Up the Ghost, I think. And I have also her short stories, The Assassination of Margaret Thatcher, and her Wolf Hall series. She's written a lot. Hilary Mantel passed away in 2022 or 23, recently, very recently. And she dealt with chronic illness that was misidentified for much of her early teen years. I think she was diagnosed in her 20s or 30s with endometriosis. And then she had health issues throughout her life with, I think, her thyroid, and she had a stroke before she passed away. Giving Up the Ghost is about how she dealt with and what she was experiencing with endometriosis. It's a good read. It's a hard read. Very raw. Also very literary in parts. So if you're not really drawn to that, you might not enjoy it as much. But I have not read the short stories yet, but I put this as a placeholder to talk about her. So I may put this on my list too to read. My May TBR is growing and growing. Read a book that features disability that affects one of the 5 senses. So one that I've read that I don't own yet is True Biz by Sarah Novick. I read this when it came out, and it's about some students who are deaf and go to a school for the deaf, and kind of their experience with potential cochlear implants. What would that mean? One of the students deals with having a sibling who is hearing, and kind of how that impacts how they feel about their place in the family. There is talk of drug abuse, and for me, it wasn't something that stuck with me a lot, or that I would have reread. That's why I didn't keep the book, but passed it along to somebody who would enjoy it. Another one is Silent House. This is a trilogy by Nell Pattison. This follows a British Sign Language interpreter who is called in to help investigate a murder of a little girl who is deaf, and her whole family is deaf, and so nobody heard it. But she also, Paige Northwood, who is the British Sign Language interpreter, has people in her life that are deaf, and she kind of knows a lot of the players in this story. I've read book 1. I plan to read book 2 this in May. And this book 2 is a school for the deaf goes on a trip, and some of the students get lost, and Paige is called in to interpret for them, translate. So yeah, this is a good series if you want to read more about sign language interpretation. This one is read a book featuring disability from a person of color or from a non-Western country. So one I just read, A Trace of Sun by Pam Williams. This is about a family from Grenada that moves to the UK, and their oldest son, Rafe, deals with schizophrenia. We kind of see him as a child, and then when he gets into his teens and early 20s, we go through kind of the early onset or his earliest experience with the onset of schizophrenia, through his hallucinations and delusions, and then how that impacts the rest of the family. So I felt like that was a pretty strong representation of that. And then the Brown sister trilogy is kind of lighter, and they're romances. The first one is Get a Life, Chloe Brown. I've read this and I own this one. And this talks about Chloe Brown, who I think deals with fibromyalgia, if I am remembering that correctly. The second one, which I have out from the library, is Take a Hint, Danny Brown. And I don't remember what Danny's disability is. But the third one, which I don't have, I'll put a picture here. I think it's called Act Your Age, Eve Brown. And Eve is on the autism spectrum. And Eve Brown was my favorite. It is hilarious. It's really funny. And then another author that I've enjoyed, this is her nonfiction, The Collected Schizophrenias by Esme Wong. This is an essay collection about Esme's experience with trying to receive psychiatric care of her symptoms and how they're impacting her life. She's also a great one to follow on social media. And she also wrote a fiction book that I think this was her first book. This is her novel, The Border of Paradise. I haven't read this yet. I'm putting it on my TBR for May, my ever-growing TBR for May. So, let's see. Read a book with a visible disability. Sorry, I read that wrong. So I just read this. I just finished this the other day, The Tea Dragon Society. And the character named, what was his name? What was his name? I totally forgot what his name is. Eric. Eric experiences a trauma and is paralyzed from the waist down and uses a wheelchair. And this is the first book in the series. It's a graphic novel. And in this, it talks about just a little bit, not really much, about his injury. So that's one. And another book that I recommend all the time is Being Human, an Unrepentant Memoir of Disability Rights Activist by Judy Human with Kristen Joyner. Judy Human was an amazing woman, or warrior. She was paralyzed due to polio when she was a child, and basically her parents were told to institutionalize her. They said no. Her parents fought for her to go to regular school, and then her trying to be a teacher, and the Board of Education telling her no, and just all these no's that she got that she challenged throughout her life. And also a lot of the laws that we have now in the US, Judy Human was a huge part of getting them passed, including doing a sit-in at the government building to make sure that the Rehab Act got passed. And they sat in for a week, 5 days. I can't remember how long it was, but there was a bunch of people from the American Association of Disabled Americans, American Association of People with Disabilities. They did a sit-in at the government buildings and got the Rehab Act passed. And like I said, great reason why we have the rights that we have. I mean, there's still a long way to go. in the area of disability rights, but the foundation in the U.S. was built by people like Judy Human. And unfortunately, Judy Human passed away last year, and she's already greatly missed. So another great memoir. Even if you aren't in the U.S., this is a great memoir. Another person with a visible disability is our own Jen Campbell, who is on BookTube. She's posting a little less frequently right now because she just had a baby, but poetry books. She has poetry collections, The Girl Aquarium, and Please Don't Touch This Exhibit. This one, Please Don't Touch This Exhibit, is by far my favorite poetry collection of all time. And then a short story collection called The Beginning of the World in the Middle of the Night. And then a sort of older child adult book is The Sister Who Ate Her Brothers and Other Gruesome Tales. Jen Campbell, illustrated by Adam D'Souza. This is looking at some, fairy tales and reimagining them, and the illustrations are amazing themselves, but the stories are great too. So that is what I have for you. I forgot one because I did not have this as organized as I wanted to, but going back to invisible disabilities, Interesting Facts About Space by Emily Austin. The main character, Enid, is on the spectrum and deals with a lot of anxiety. So this is another great one for the prompt of read a book with a character who has an invisible disability. So I wanted to mention that. And then the group read is The Secret of Haven Point by Lizette Otten. I have read this and love it. I recommend it. It's a middle grade book about some kids called Recklings, and they are basically wash up on the shore to Haven Point, and it's become a ramshackle home for any disabled person who needs somewhere to belong. So it's so good, so good. I've tabbed a bunch of it. I may reread it just to participate in the group read, but so I'm going to talk about some of the books I plan to read for the for the Spoonie Readathon. Some of them I've already mentioned, but I'm going to talk about this is, I don't think it's a series. I think this is just the next book that Lizette Otten wrote. The Stickleback Catchers. Down by the river where the silvery sticklebacks swim, Mimi, Titch, and Nuzrat are the stickleback catchers, solvers of puzzles, seekers of adventure. I'm tongue-tied. This is dealing with dementia. Mimi's grand, forgets things, and Mimi has the ability to see things. So I'm excited to jump back into a world written by Lizette Otten. I don't know much about this, and I can't even remember where I heard about it, but it is a graphic novel, Notes from a Sickbed by Tessa Brunton. And this is dealing with Tessa Brunton's experience with her first symptoms of myalgic encephalomyelitis, which is also sometimes called chronic fatigue syndrome, unfortunately. But I'm interested in that because that is something I have. And I don't really read a lot of graphic novels, but if it's written about disability, I will definitely get into it. Let's see. Another author who has an invisible disability that if you want to read, that's Elle McNichol, who writes middle grade books. This is Show Us Who You Are. And I believe Elle McNichol is neurodivergent. This is when Cora meets Adrian, she isn't looking for a new best friend. She doesn't want to explain that she's different. But Adrian surprises her, and soon she's drawn into a whirlwind of fun, adventure, and true friendship, and into the world of the mysterious Pomegranate Institute. Cora becomes captivated by Pomegranate's hologram technology that can bring people back to life. But there are secrets lurking beneath the surface that threaten everything she knows to be true. Can Cora fight to make her voice heard and not lose sight of herself? So I'm excited to read that. And then one that I haven't read yet, but is recommended by a lot of people in the disability community. This is Sitting Pretty, The View from My Ordinary Resilient Disabled Body by Rebecca Townsend. This is about Rebecca, this is an essay collection about her experience in her body. I think she's a teacher and a parent. I'm not sure if it gets into in those parts of her identity as well. But I've heard a lot of great things about this memoir and don't know how I haven't read it yet. So this is going to be to meet the prompt of reading a book about a person with a physical disability. I think that's it. That's all I can share because I'm almost out of, my throat's getting dry. Are you participating in Spoonie Readathon? What are you reading? Do you have other recommendations? Put them in the comments below. And if you like this content, please click like and subscribe and come back Friday. I will be talking a little bit about my own experience as a Spoonie, as someone with a disability. And yeah, I'll see you then. Bye.